My name is Barry Newsome. I am a recovered alcoholic and drug addict and convict. I grew up in an alcoholic home where it was just a normal thing to do. So it was a learned behavior for me. I didn't know until, I started trying to fill the void. There was a lot of emotional abandonment in my home as far as my father, and a lot of mental abuse, which to me is worse than physical abuse. So I didn't know that as a child, but growing up, I was really good in school. I was really good in sports, but I had a problem coexisting with people, my peers. So the first opportunity I got was to drink. I didn't know, this would turn into, the monster kind of got released. I started getting into trouble. I am a 4-time convicted felon. I have been to prison. I've been to jail. I've probably done over 3 years behind bars and probably 19 in my head. It's been a real painful ride. At some point, I think when my father died in 2012, it was almost like the resentment was released and I was able to get sober. I did have one relapse because I didn't take suggestions. I didn't connect all the dots. And I think at some point, nobody wakes up one day and says, I want to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. I don't think that's anybody's ambition. And so many people experiment, yet only certain ones, and science hasn't proven it yet, why when we pass into the state where we lose the power of choice, and then it becomes our drug of no choice. You see what I'm saying? And at that point, that becomes the number one priority, and that's what happened with me. Statistics at 50 to 60% of addicts is it's genetic, 25% is environmental, 20% is unknown. So there's a wide range there. In my case, my dad was an alcoholic and it did kill him. The environment spoke for itself. It was a lot of discord in the family. It wasn't a safe place to be. So that's 85% for me right there. I was probably born that. I guess it doesn't matter why I am an alcoholic or an addict, but what I do about it today. I think probably in my early 30s, I was arrested by the SWAT team on June 13th of 2003. That's the stigma that we talk about. I was labeled. That's just the discrimination. It's a hate. I'm tattooed as a convict. And I look at guys today, and it's not so much what they're doing on the surface. I want to know the person behind the drug, you know what I mean? At that point, it still didn't stop me, because at that point I thought I was at the point of no return. I just kept going, and I didn't see no end. But at some point, the pain, the big book talks about this, when the pain is great enough. And the last time I got arrested, October 28th, 2013, I was done. And there's a difference between being finished and being done. It was a possession of heroin charge. I honestly believe I had my first spiritual experience in jail at that point, because I had steps 1, 2, 3 beaten into me while I was in there. I knew I was powerless. My life was definitely unmanageable. I did come to believe and trust in a power greater than myself, and I did make that decision to turn my will on my life. I think it was divine intervention. I believe God speaks through people, and I believe He spoke through her. As soon as I had surrendered to the disease itself, all these great things started happening for me, and I had a bond I couldn't even get out. I had 2 more felonies which were seeking indictments and 5 misdemeanors. I was in a hole. I couldn't even see my way out of it. But things started happening. I got into drug court, and I started this process, but in the meantime, this stigma that we talk about stayed with me. I'm still an alcoholic. I still was in that transformation stage where I have to be able to take the punishment, because resentment is the number one offender for any addict alcoholic. And that could be with a parent, that could be with a child, that could be with a boss, society as a whole. That's why so many people go back out. I know the first 2 years for opiate addicts, the recovery rate is 18%. And that's ridiculously low. It's low. It's too low. So how do we prevent that? How do we make the numbers higher? I think social media can be a good thing, and I also think it can be a very evil thing, because I can't get the happiness that I'm looking for in materialistic things. I can't get it in a job. I can't get it in my girlfriend. I can't get it in the house. Money can't buy it. In my case, from my experience, it was I made contact with a power called God. So in this process, I still had to take this social and legal discrimination that was against me as a convict and drug addict. I even had, even 15 months into sobriety, I had custody battles going on with CSB. And I have to believe today everything was the way it was supposed to be. But I heard the chatter in the background. He's not going to make it. He's going to relapse. He's going to prison. He's going back to prison. But yet all this time I just kept walking. I just kept going, one step at a time, one step at a time. And all of a sudden, I got into drug court, and the felonies started dropping off. I got convicted on a couple of them. That brought me into drug court. I started paying my fines. I got a job at 4 months sobriety in the same factory that I worked 20 years prior. You want to talk about humility? Third shift, never worked in my life. but I made a decision and I moved on it. I think our people closest to us can be the ones that are the most damaging, and like the family members. Family members of an alcoholic and an addict can be just as sick or sicker than the alcoholic themselves, because it is a family disease. So what affected me directly affected everybody else around me indirectly. We learn this as we go, as we start doing step work and we start talking to people, being around people that are doing this. And I said this before, I come from a sponsorship family where permanent sobriety is expected. So I think it was divine intervention. It just, I got placed where I was supposed to be. And I started seeing things that I didn't see before. I was in a toxic relationship with a woman that doesn't even drink or use. But when I got to a certain point, and I wasn't mad, but I understand I needed to go this way. And again, I made a decision and I wasn't stopping. So, and then there was just more chatter. And this, I drove around for probably 2.5 years with work privileges. I started painting at Glen Bay and Rock Creek, and it was just weird how I left the factory I was working at because I wanted to go back out and do the business again that my dad had before he died. So I did start it. I was successful right off the bat, but something took me to Glen Bay to paint. And I ended up there for 6 months, and one day I left to go get something to drink at the gas station. I got pulled over by a cop that had arrested me like 6 times previous. He knew, and the thing about it, he never got me out of the car, which was a first, and I actually argued with him. He did his job because I was an hour outside the timeline, and I got a driving under suspension. I'm 2 years into sobriety, but it worked out, and that was the last time that stigma from the legal, from the police, it started losing its depth and weight. It just wasn't there anymore. Today I go around, I go uptown, everybody knows me in Jefferson. Used to be in a bad way, now it's in a good way. But it's a process, it's a recalibration of my thinking that has to take place through the step work, and it's not easy. That's why it's only at 18%. It's not those for who need it, it's for those who want it. At that point, you start feeling better about yourself. We can be, a person like myself can be so hard on myself. That's why we did what we did in the beginning. Because I was talking about the instincts, the sex, social, and security. We put our ambition with that. There's our ego, and they dominate an addict. For some reason, science hasn't yet figured out, but they dominate us, and that's why we do what we do. So when we do inventory, we get down to causes and conditions, because it's not so much the drug or the substance we're picking up, it's what's going on in here that's making me want to pick that substance up. It's a pretty fascinating deal. When I got into it and I started actually seeing things that I didn't see before, and the weight kept coming off. Everything in my life that's happened, I believe, has been spiritually guided towards, not so much emotionally driven. I talk about, I'm pretty bare bones when I speak as far as like to crowds and stuff. It's either one or the other. But everything in the middle, existing or living abundantly, the caterpillar and the butterfly, it all goes through a metamorphosis stage. And it's painful at times, and it's supposed to be. At times it was uncomfortable. Sometimes I doubted it maybe, but then someone told me one time, doubt your doubts. It's not the pink cloud that everybody likes to say. It's God's grace. It's unmerited love that you don't even deserve, but you get it anyways. Enjoy it. Again, that sponsorship family was really important to me, and I haven't looked back since, and it's that job I was painting at Glen Bay, they ended up recruiting me to be a counseling assistant. Again, that was kind of awkward a little bit. It's like, what? But it wasn't so much, we don't tell people what we're doing in this thing, we show them. Actions speak louder than words. Being an addict, we want what we want it now. That's why we do. We're emotionally driven. But when we become spiritually guided through the step work, we don't try to look for our purpose. We let it find us. That's a beautiful thing. And then when I got to that point, and then I got hired, and it was second shift. I was grateful. But 3 months in, I was content, but I wasn't satisfied. Now I wanted more. So everything I was chasing out on the street, love, respect, loyalty, trust, I get it in recovery for free. But now I'm just as hungry in recovery as I was out there now. But the thing happened, like 4 months in, there was somebody that went to another job, somebody got promoted, and I got right up into first shift. And then I got my CDCA license. Then I got a promotion about a month ago. It's just like, it just doesn't stop. And it's like, and at times I can still, is this really real? I think the power of it is really in prayer, and it's really about consistency for me. I tell guys that I sponsor, water doesn't cut through rock by power. A formless entity does not cut through a solid object, but it will do it if it's persistent, because it never stops. And we see it all over the world. Mm-hmm. It never stops. It just keeps moving. So that's what I encourage guys, just don't stop, because people are gonna wrong you, people are still gonna let you down. That's just humanity. That's the world. But it doesn't have to stop you from doing what you're doing. And if I choose to persevere through adversity, That's what builds my character and continues to define who we are. Sometimes it takes a life-altering incident like mine, when my father died, for this to happen. They do love you. There's always something going on inside of the addict that makes them do what they do. We're indirectly sick as well. Don't love them to death. Don't enable them. Keep encouraging them. Addiction is a disease. It don't ever be fooled otherwise. It is a disease of our thinking. We just got to be able to have healthy boundaries. And at times, if you have to, if you've exhausted all efforts, use some tough love. Make it uncomfortable for them. They didn't choose to be an addict. That wasn't their choice. They might have been having fun at first, but when they lost the power of choice, they have no choice now. Seek help. Be teachable. Do not give up. People in recovery are the strongest people you're ever going to meet. And some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, the most intelligent people I've met, have been in the depths of hell that I've been through. This thing's not for marathon runners, and we have to keep walking in this thing. You know, we can't, there's no sprint to the finish line. We have to go, keep moving. You know, you make a mistake, get back up on your feet and walk. You know, it's supposed to hurt at first. The pain doesn't last forever. It really doesn't. We can either exist or we can choose to live abundantly. There is a power called God because I found it. It's in the step work. The trick to this whole thing is in the step work. When we do the inventory, when we get to that stage in recovery, that comes out, and what happens is our feelings and emotions start coming back. At first they bounce around like a ping pong ball because they've been suppressed for so long. But when they start balancing themselves out, we start to have emotions like you do. There's absolutely help out there. If you use it in a good manner, you can find it on social media. You can find it at treatment centers, Signature Health, Glen Bay, even people in the probation department, the police department. This thing is an epidemic. It is a plague now. It's getting so bad. We're strength in numbers. You just got to seek it. It's all about consistency. Just keep coming up. Just keep coming back. Don't let nobody bring you down. If you make a decision, you can do anything you put your mind to, because your mind is only going to be affected by what you believe to be true. If I believe I'm going to make it, or if I believe I'm not going to make it, I'm right either way, because that's how it's going to end up.